Are you thinking about making a podcast? If you are, I know you want to be able to make that podcast in a way that's easy and not complicated. And you want to be able to make that podcast in a way that it's not going to cost you an arm or a leg. Well, I have a solution for you. It's called Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast. Here's what you need to do. Download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm to get started. Start your podcast today. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Currently On podcast. This is the podcast where I take some time to talk about what's currently on. Get it? Get it? Isn't that clever? Isn't that ingenious? Okay. Maybe it's not that clever. Maybe it's not that ingenious, but it does give you an idea about what this podcast is truly about. This podcast is dedicated to me telling you about what's currently on, and it doesn't matter if it's movies, TV shows, podcasts, sports. If it's on, I talk about it, and hopefully you like to listen to me talk about it, because if you don't, well, then this podcast is destined to be a failure. It is doomed from the beginning. So hopefully when I talk about what's currently on, I do so in such a way that you find it interesting, informative, and that maybe my perspective and my take and how I talk about things that are currently on, maybe I do so from such a unique perspective that it makes it worth your time to listen, and it motivates you to share this podcast with everyone else you know. Now, if you really hate this podcast, then share it with the people you hate. If you love it, then share it with the people you love, and share it with the people you hate. Okay, just share it with everyone. All right, but welcome. This is the Currently On podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. But before we can talk about what's currently on today, I have a question for you. How adventurous are you? Would you consider yourself an adventurous person? Now, you may say yes, but wait, I'm asking about how adventurous you are related to a specific context. So let me restate the question. Let me rephrase the question. How adventurous are you when it comes to what you watch on television? How adventurous are you when it comes to the movies you choose to watch? Let me place it in an older setting. Let me place this question in an older setting, an older context. Now, for those of you who are older, you'll understand this context. You'll understand this setting. Those of you who are younger, stay with me. I will place this question in a more current context in a minute. But if you're older, do you remember those days where you and a number of friends would hop in a car and you would drive to the video rental store? Yeah, you remember them? Yeah. Now, those of you who are younger, you may want to Google it. You may want to look it up. But yes, there was a day that if you wanted to watch a movie, you would get in a car and you would drive to a video rental store. And there would be rows and rows and rows of movies, all right? VHS tapes. And you would walk up and down the aisles looking at the tapes, picking up the tape, going, hey, what about this one? What about this one? And typically, if you were with a group of friends, you had kind of, your friends would fall into one of these categories. Category one, they only wanted to watch what was already well known. They kind of kept it safe. They went with what's known. They went with what's mainstream. They went with what's popular. They went with what they already knew. And they never really wanted to venture out to anything unknown. They didn't really want to go way out there. You know, they wanted to stay on the beaten path. They wanted to stay on the well-traveled road. They wanted to stay on the interstate highway, right? They didn't want to take off. They didn't want to take a turn off some side country road that they didn't know where it was going. They wanted to stay with what they knew. All right. And so you would say, what about this movie? No, never heard of that. No, never heard of that. And they would go to, the popular movies, the movies that were, new release movies that were well known. And you'd be like, okay. And sometimes you'd be like, haven't we already seen that 7 times? Yeah, but I love it. I'm like, well, can't we try something different? And if they didn't know it, they hadn't heard of it, they weren't willing to try it. Then you may have someone in your group who was, look, if it's well known and if it's mainstream, I don't like it. It's a sellout. It's corporate. It's mainstream. I don't like it. And they would go, choose something so far off the road. You're like, what is that? And so you either had it had to be mainstream, well known, or it had to be something not well known. Looks like it was made with $5 and, they used $5, some bubble gum and some duct tape to make it. So sometimes you had the two friends who were at the extreme. Rarely did you have that one in the middle who'd be like, oh, I like to try things we haven't seen, or, oh, I can do mainstream. Rarely did you find that person in the middle. It seems like you always had these kind of extremes. Now, for me, I was all over the place. I had no problem with going with the mainstream popular, but at the same time, like if we were going to rent 2 movies, then my thought was, let's get something that maybe, and I definitely was the person, I do not like to watch a movie more than once. Rarely do I like to watch a movie more than once. If I've seen it, I know the narrative, I know the story, I get it, I know how it's going to end. Typically, I don't like to watch it again. Every once in a while, there'll be a movie that I really, really like, and I'll watch it maybe more than once. But typically, that's not me. So I would, if it was new and well known, I definitely didn't want to already have seen it. And I definitely, for that second movie, I like to just pick something that I had never heard of, had no idea what was in it, I had no clue, never heard a review about it, never seen it, didn't know anything about it. I wanted that kind of like, maybe we'll discover that hidden treasure. Maybe we'll discover that movie that nobody else knows, but everybody should know because it's so brilliant. I like to do that. So I was kind of somewhere in the middle. I could do both, but I would have those friends. Nope. That's too mainstream. Or I'd have the friend like, nope, I'm only going to watch what I know. And that usually led to a lot of frustration. And sometimes it'd be better to go to the movie store completely by yourself. All right. So the video store, movie store, depending on, what you called it back then. So that kind of, you can kind of judge from that and decide where you fit in. Now, if we put it in a more immediate context and our current context, when it comes to what you watch on streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, it doesn't matter the streaming service, HBO Max, you name the streaming service, how adventurous are you? Do you find yourself just watching something maybe over and over and over and over and over you've already seen before? Or do you really kind of venture out there into the unknown? Do you spend a lot of time just clicking through, scrolling through, going, oh, look at that. Okay, never seen that before. How do you determine it? Now, sometimes if you have multiple people in your house, maybe it's a husband, a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, you can find yourself again, kind of, almost arguing and can't come to an agreement, because sometimes you'll have some people who will not venture out beyond what they know. They're going to stick with the same kind of movie, same kind of TV show, same genre. It's like, can you not expand your horizons? Now, the reason I ask you that question is because, the new streaming service, Peacock TV, I was sitting there scrolling through everything Peacock TV has to offer, and I came across a movie, and I was like, okay, I'm obviously familiar with the genre. Okay, it's 1961. All right, this is a little off the beaten path. Let's watch it. So I popped some popcorn, and I watched the movie from 1961. And it is, I think in some ways it's off the beaten path, even for the type of movie that it is, even for the genre of movie it is. I think they kind of approach the subject in a different way. So I'm here to tell you about it. And the reason I'm asking you if you're adventurous, because if you're not, then you're probably not even going to try this. There's a lot of you who, when I tell you about this movie, you're going to be like, that's not my thing. I don't like that type of thing. And I'm just asking you, don't be that way. When you have a streaming service, you're paying, $9 a month, $10 a month, whatever you're paying per month. Use it, right? Like I can't stand when people like, well, there's nothing on, like they say they have a subscription to Netflix. Man, I can't find anything worth watching. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's 25 billion choices. Yeah, but I don't like that. Yeah, I don't like that. Then why even have a streaming service? If you're not going to be adventurous, don't even have a streaming service, okay? Just rent movies, okay? Just rent the same kind of movies. Just rent, just buy the season of your favorite TV show. Don't even have a subscription to anything, because unless you're going to take advantage of all the content they throw at you, then you're really wasting your money. If you're spending the money, just watch anything and everything. Expand those horizons. Try to understand other forms of storytelling. Try to understand other kinds of stories, not just stay in the same rut. Get out of it. So this one may require a lot of you to get out of your rut. I don't know how many people will try it, but that's okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the original trailer for this. 1961. Here is the original trailer. Listen carefully.
The curse of the werewolf that was laid on a baby who grew into a man possessed by a monster. To this Spanish town, the night brought drinking and dancing, music and girls, and the moon. The full moon that turned an innocent man into a savage beast. The curse of the werewolf, a man possessed by a desperate need for love, who found in Christina all the passionate sincerity of youth.
Christina, do you love me? Will you marry me, Christina? You say you love me, will you marry me?
Yes. Yes, I will.
Help me! Get away! Get away! Get away! No!
There you have it. The Curse of the Werewolf. The Curse of the Werewolf is a 1961 British horror film based on the novel The Werewolf of Paris. Now, it's based off the novel Werewolf of Paris, but it's actually set in Spain. And the reason it's set in Spain, they were trying to make another movie that was basically denied, I guess, by kind of the film censors, those who back in that time, a movie had to be approved by the censors and what could get by and what was acceptable. And the movie they tried to make was, I think, set in the Inquisition. It was called The Rape of, I think, Sabrina, maybe what was the name of it. And it was rejected. So they kind of decided, well, we're gonna have to make a movie. So they took this idea from The Werewolf of Paris. They set it in Spain, okay? And what they decided to do is use some of those same sets and use this and decide to make this movie, The Curse of the Werewolf. Now, as I will call this a genre. I mean, obviously it's a horror film. I'll call it a movie that would be a part of the werewolf movie family, all right? I'm not necessarily a fan of werewolf movies. I don't think I've ever seen one I've really said, that was really good. I don't think I've ever really been a fan of any of them for a number of reasons. I've always thought the concept was cool. Okay, here's a person and, because of the full moon, they turn into a werewolf. But, and so it always, like when I was a kid, the concept of a werewolf really fascinated me. It really did. It was like this cool idea. It was scary. But the way movies always dealt with the narrative of the werewolf was, I don't know. It either got, it's like sometimes they took it too seriously. I think they almost treated it too seriously. I'm like, this is B movie gold. You just want someone turning into a werewolf, and then there's action and adventure and fighting. So I think was it the Underworld series? The Underworld series, they had werewolves in it, and I think I like that concept. So maybe there's been a couple here or there, but I think for the most part, the way they just handle the narrative, it's just irritating. It's just, I don't know. It's all more about this internal struggle. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on what I don't really like about the way the movies went. The way the movies have been handled. I guess in my mind as a child, when I first discovered this idea of the werewolf and started reading different things, I wanted it like, adventure, scary, and not really about the internal struggle of the individual who becomes a werewolf. I guess what I kind of wanted is the person turn into a werewolf and embrace the fact they were a werewolf, right? Yeah, I'm a werewolf and I love it, right? Not like, oh no, I'm conflicted. Oh, there's this evil inside of me. Oh, what am I going to do? It's like that melodramatic, over the top, like, okay, I don't really care about your your internal conflict that you're struggling with. I don't care about that. Just go unleash the werewolf and make this a crazy adventure-packed, action-packed film. Maybe that was my problem, and maybe I wanted it more shallow than maybe some of the directors were. But I just think when you're dealing with the idea of the werewolf, really, how deep do you really want to get? I don't know, but. So I can't say I'm necessarily a fan of this kind of film. So this is what happened. Peacock TV streaming service. All right. I've already talked to you about it in previous episodes. Peacock TV streaming service was made available on Wednesday, and I've obviously been exploring it. So I'm sitting there going through it, and I'm like, The Curse of the Werewolf. And I noticed that they had a number of films in this kind of, older horror films, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Curse of the Mummy, I think The Creature of the Black Lagoon. They have a bunch of them. I'm like, okay, maybe I should explore some of them. And so I saw the ones that obviously are well known, Frankenstein, Creature of the Black Lagoon, Dracula. Obviously, those are well known. And I saw The Curse of the Werewolf. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I've seen this one. I'm like, I've seen a lot of the werewolf films, but I don't think I've ever seen this one. So I'm like, okay, it's not really my thing, but I'm going to venture out there and give it a shot. So I decided to watch it, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about it. And again, I'm not going to try to spoil anything for you, because I want you to go. I want you to go try it for yourself. I want you to explore it for yourself. But I want to give you some thoughts about it and maybe give you some different perspectives. I would put The Curse of the Werewolf definitely in the realm of a B movie. I definitely would put it there. As you heard from the trailer, way melodramatic, over-the-top acting, super, and they try to take it way super serious, which again, to me, destroys the fun. A werewolf movie should be fun, not this melodramatic stuff. But yes, you could definitely hear from that. Here's a couple of things, or here's one interesting thing about it. It was the first werewolf film to be shot in color. So The Curse of the Werewolf, this 1961 British horror film, it was the first werewolf film to be shot in color. So that kind of makes it an interesting film to watch from a historical perspective. And when I went back to try to find some of the older reviews on it, it seems that a lot were like really impressed with how it looked. You know, oh, this looked really good. And so, but I mean, when you're watching it in 2020, it's hard for you to go, wait, look how, look, it's in color. Oh, wow. This is the first werewolf film in color. Maybe in 1961, people were saying that. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't born, but I think it's interesting just from a historical perspective to watch it, asking yourself, I wonder what people thought because they could see it in color. What I would really point to is anytime you see blood in the movie, well, it would be in color. So would this have been shocking? Like, I'm always trying to put myself in the historical context. I don't know, but it is interesting to note that it was the first werewolf film shot in color. A second thing I would point out here, just these are some interesting tidbits, and I'm gonna get to the themes and the messages. First, werewolf film shot in color. Second, and I thought this was interesting, the transformation. I think that's the big, like when you watch a werewolf film, you're always asking, okay, they're going to have that dramatic transformation when the person turns into a werewolf. All right. How many different, like, do they show the entire process of the transformation every time the individual turns into a werewolf? Because after once or twice, does it now become redundant? And you're like, just get to it. We know how we've seen it once. Do we need to see it again? Sometimes you'll be like, oh boy, it's like, it feels like 5 minutes for them to turn into a werewolf. And you're like, would you just get to it? Sometimes that to me is frustrating about these movies. Now, the first time they show it is always cool because you want to know how well they pull it off. And The Curse of the Werewolf, I mean, I know it's 1961. I wasn't too impressed with the transformation. It's like put some of the costume and some of the makeup on the person. Stop, take a picture. All right, put some more of the makeup and the costume on the person. Stop, take a photograph. Okay, put a little bit more. Stop, take a photograph, and then just kind of like literally the way it's like the way they show it is like the film is going. Here's the stopped photograph with some of the makeup on. Move. Here's the second photograph. It's really like the stop, move kind of. That's the best way I know there's a technical term for it, but that's the best way I can explain it. It's not. Maybe the finished product looks pretty cool, but the little transformation is kind of weak. It's kind of weak. But again, it's 1961, so I cannot judge it because I don't know how people would have perceived it in 1961. In 1961, people may have been walking out of the theater going, man, did you see when he turned into a werewolf? That was so awesome. I mean, I don't know what they'd have been saying in 1961, but you get the idea. I wasn't that impressed with it, but you have to at least put it in its historical context. All right, so first werewolf movie shot in color. The transformation from man to werewolf, not so good. I thought they had a really cool opportunity in the story of the werewolf as a child. I thought they could have really done something with that, but they didn't really explore that. They moved past that relatively quick. You'll see that in the movie if you watch it. Now, one of the things that at first I didn't catch on, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, whoa. So that's what happened? All right. Let me try to explain this without giving this away. There is clearly an implied rape in the movie. Now, for me, whenever movies or TV shows deal with the subject of rape, I don't like the subject of rape. I don't want to see it. I'm not a fan of any story that even contains it, especially if it's explicit and showing rape. It's just, it disturbs me. I don't like it. I'm not entertained by it. I understand that rape can be a central part of a story. I think the way you handle it, like, some directors want to be explicit so you kind of feel the trauma of it. I'm not a fan of that. Some want to imply it. This one definitely, it's implied. Yeah, I mean, in fact, when the scene where it supposedly happens, I don't know if you're even really going to get it. And then later on, you're going to go, oh, obviously that's what occurred. That's what occurred. So, it's just, I guess the reason I point that out is the movie they were going to make prior to this one was called The Rape. I think it was of Sabrina. I think it was dealing with the Spanish Inquisition. And I just think it's interesting that obviously that original movie the focus was on a rape. And then they decided to put a rape part into this movie. So, but they clearly, they had to go along with whatever would be allowed or not allowed in the making of a movie at that time in 1961. So it's very much implied. You're going to see it and you're going to be like, okay, oh, all right. And I don't think you're going to get it. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's what happened. And the reason why is because the woman who suffers the rape ends up pregnant. And that's where you're going to get everything. And there's an interesting narrative that develops from that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So I just think that that's interesting that it's there and the way it's handled. Again, it's not explicit in any way, shape, or form. It's implied, and then you're gonna get it, and then maybe you'll catch. Well, I think older people will catch on. A younger person may not even get it or understand. But that is in the movie, which I found somewhat interesting, being 1961, and I guess it demonstrates again to trying to make this more serious. Taking away quote unquote the popcorn kind of fun you think of a werewolf movie. I think that adds a really serious dark element to it. So you can determine. Now, when it comes to themes, the big theme that I thought they were really, really going to explore, and you can, by the time you get to the end of the movie, you'll have to determine for yourself, does the end of the movie stay with the theme that was clearly established at the beginning of the movie. At the beginning of the movie, and everyone will see this, there's this major theme. And this major theme, we can almost call this the war between the classes, right? The nobility, the rich, I'll use a more current term, the elite versus the peasant, the poor, the working class. The nobility versus the peasant, the elite versus the working class. They really want you to see this conflict between the two. And the elite, the nobility, they are portrayed in the most negative light possible. They're greedy, they're arrogant, they're condescending. They don't care. They don't care about the poor. The poor is simply there for their own amusement. They're there they take from the poor for their own benefit, for their own advancement, for their own enjoyment, for their own pleasure. I mean, they really hammer this out in the film. I mean, big time. I mean, the very beginning of this movie, you're like, man, the rich, the nobility, they are garbage. They are complete dirt. All right. They're lower than life. And so there's a part of you thinking the way the narrative is going to go is, okay, the rich, the nobility, they're going to get theirs in the end. They're going to get theirs in the end because the werewolf, boom, he's going to wipe out all of the nobility. He's going to go on a warpath and kill them all because of what happened to him. But they don't take the story in that direction, which is really bizarre because you're thinking they've got this set up and they don't really explore it. And you're like, you've got the story, the nobility. Because basically, here's how it goes: the nobility and the evil acts of this upper class, the rich, because of their actions, in a roundabout way, leads to the entire curse of the werewolf. Everything really traces back. It all starts with the cruel actions of the nobility. And you're thinking, okay, then the werewolf's going to go back and just take them all out. And that's what you're going to get. But no. That's not how the story goes. You have the actions of the nobility that sets everything in motion, which ultimately leads to the curse of the werewolf. And then by the time the story ends, you're like, well, that's depressing. That did not go the direction I thought it was. Now, you may not, from the very beginning, you may not think it's going to go the direction I thought it was going to go, but I was like, here we go. we're going to get a bloodbath, destruction and killing of the nobility. But that does not happen. But clearly this distinction between the two is very much there, which leads to the idea of the curse. It's called the curse of the werewolf. So what brings about the curse of the werewolf, right? I mean, a movie named The Curse of the Werewolf. Don't you think that's what we should explore? And it's really weird. So here's your options. The curse came about because of rape. Rape produced the werewolf. Now, is this a subtle way of saying something about a child conceived in rape? Is this that the curse, that the evil act of rape, the curse that produces a curse? Is that like, there's a really subtle thing there that you're like, is that what they're saying? And then what's really bizarre is in the movie, though, they don't really imply that it's the rape that produces the curse. They almost implied, and this is really weird, that the reason the curse came about because the child is born on Christmas Day. That if a child is born on Christmas Day, they are cursed. Now, I think, is this because the Christmas Day is supposed to be the day you remember the birth of Christ, and any other child born on his day is cursed because he's trying to take away from the day of Christ? That is a really weird religious connotation thrown in here. Really weird. You're like, wait a minute. Are you saying, hey, if your child is born on Christmas, he's cursed because this is the day we remember Christ, and your kid came along trying to take away from it? Like, that's really a kind of a religious superstition, right? Then what's interesting, another interesting thing, so we got this class warfare. We got how the curse comes about, and then we have this really interesting idea. How can the curse be overcome? Now, because there is a religious connotation, because you have priests, you have the Catholic Church represented in the film, and you have the priest talking, you think when you deal with the idea of the werewolf, you would possibly deal with this idea of like the sinful nature in human beings. Obviously, one of the key elements of Christian teaching is that people are born sinners, that they have a sinful, depraved nature. The reason people do sinful acts is because they are sinners by nature. It's a basic, fundamental, foundational teaching of Christianity, all right? So you would think that the film would kind of approach it that way, but it seemed to approach it more like, okay, the werewolf has this evil inside of it. The rest of us doesn't. And the only way to overcome the curse, not God, but love. It's like the priest is very almost secular in his perspective. He's not very religious, which is kind of interesting because you think the film kind of sets up this maybe exploring the idea of evil inside of people and explore it from a religious way. But the priest is very secular. Hey, what he needs is just love. Hey, parents, if you love him, he can overcome this evil inside of him. If he finds the love of a woman, he can overcome it. But then when he finds the love of a woman, well, then nobody wants him to have the love of the woman. And then, well, it all ends up in chaos. So it's some interesting themes to explore there. We have the class warfare, which is interesting, how the curse comes about, how the curse is overcome, and then at the end, you're going to have a major emphasis on the idea of sacrifice, on sacrifice. What needs to be sacrificed? And then when the movie is ended, when the movie comes to its dramatic ending, you're kind of left with going, well, wait, so did nobility really pay for what they did? Does like when it's all said and done, you're kind of thinking, what's the ultimate message in the movie? And I don't know if you're really left with a central message. I think there was a lot of different themes, but I don't know if it ever comes together in a cohesive message. And if that's the case, well, then that's definitely a negative part of the film. All right. So I'll at least throw that out there. I will say this, the movie doesn't have as much action as I think It didn't have, I think here's the negative part of the movie. It didn't have enough action for a werewolf film. I think a werewolf film should have more action. It explored some of these themes, but it didn't really explore the themes in a way that brought it to a cohesive conclusion in the narrative, which to me means it's lacking. So here's what we have. We have a B movie who takes itself a little too serious, so therefore it's not really fun. And instead of focusing on action, they try to focus on some of these broader themes, but then they're not able to bring the themes all together, to me, and a cohesive conclusion that draws, okay, this is what it's saying about nobility versus the poor. This is what it's saying about how the curse came about. This is what it's saying about how to overcome the curse. It's just like, here's all of these individual themes, but they don't really come together in a final message. And as a result, I definitely can't say that it's a great film, but historically it's interesting. 1961, the first werewolf film filmed in color. You've got Rape, which is just kind of shocking that it's there in 1961. And then you have all of these different themes, which are kind of fun to explore. So currently streaming on Peacock TV is The Curse of the Werewolf, the 1961 British film. Now, this film is, I think there are two werewolf films that came later that I think make a reference to The Curse of the Werewolf. I think The Howling and I think A Werewolf in London. I think both films make a reference to The Curse of the Werewolf. And I can't say that I'm a fan of The Howling, and I cannot say that I was a fan of A Werewolf in London. Again, I've not been a fan of very few werewolf films. I guess I'm a fan of Michael Jackson turning into a werewolf in Thriller. Okay, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. In fact, that was more fun and B-movie-ish. But they didn't even stick with the werewolf very long, because the next thing you know, it turns into zombies dancing in the middle of the street. Okay, yes, we can go back and we could talk about the Thriller video. That was an epic event in my childhood. I'll never forget the night MTV premiered that. I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Nothing will ever top this. But that's a whole different story. So there you have it. That's currently on Peacock TV. The Curse of the Werewolf. Be a little adventurous. You may want to watch it. I don't think I gave away too many spoilers. I think I left everything vague enough for you to be able to pick up the narrative, and then you'll see these themes as they develop, and you can draw your own conclusion. Maybe you see a message at the end. I didn't, but you can let me know what you think. There you have it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Currently On. We're focused and dedicated to talking about what's currently on. This evening, if you want to be adventurous, we're going to have the first possible wrestling match using CGI. That should be interesting tonight. WWE tonight has their pay-per-view Extreme Rules horror show. Because of the COVID-19 situation, they can't have a crowd. So they're going to be doing at least two matches, as far as we know, two matches that are going to be done like a movie. Sound effects, music, CGI. It's going to be interesting. You can subscribe to the WWE Network for $9, $9.99 for a month. You can watch all the other content that's on there, but you can watch the pay-per-view, which would typically be, $50, $60, and you can watch it for $9.99. Be adventurous. Give it a shot, okay? The stories are pretty easy to pick up. They always recap the story lines before the match, so you'll know exactly what's going on. Maybe you've never... I will say, don't judge wrestling based off wrestling in this COVID-19 situation, because typically wrestling needs a crowd. It really does. So it's been interesting for them to try to tell their stories this way. It's been at times it's been fun. At times it's been pretty interesting. But we'll see what they do tonight, because we know at least two of the matches are going to be done in a movie-like way. So I'm interested to see what happens. And I'm still currently watching The Capture on Peacock TV. I watched episode 2 of that last night. That show is really good. I'm really enjoying it. Warrior Nun on Netflix. I'm really enjoying that. Cursed. I've watched episode 1. I'm not really sold on this one yet. That's also streaming on Netflix. And then there's a show on, what's it called? Freeform, FF Freeform Television. It's available via Hulu. They have a show called Homeland Salem. I think it's what it's called. In fact, let me look here. It just got approved for season 2. Let me look here. It's called Motherland Fort Salem. Motherland Fort Salem. And again, it is streaming on, I think it's FF Freeform, I think is what it's called. Yeah, Freeform. That's the network. It was originally released on March the 18th to 2020. How many episodes? 10 episodes in season 1. And it's been approved for season 2. Here's what I would tell you. I started watching, because the name Salem was in the title, and I visited Salem in Massachusetts and went to the witch museum. I was fascinated, like, okay, this deals with witches. Salem is mentioned. I wonder if it's filmed in Salem, because I would like to see, how they would show Salem in a TV show. So I was kind of interested, and I started watching. I didn't make it very far because I had to stop. But I'm definitely going to explore it. I will just say the opening scene of Motherland Fort Salem on Freeform TV. Whoa, it's a bizarre opening scene. I mean, they definitely get your attention. It's pretty crazy. So I'm going to be exploring that one as well a little bit more. So that's what's currently on. Everyone have a great weekend. Find something to watch. Find something to stream. And hey, be a little adventurous. All right, everyone have a great weekend.